I'm Charlene Hunter-Galt. Two prominent Republicans clash over the president's position on civil rights. Gergen and Shields, unraveling the biggest bank fraud in history, and a town torn apart by gruesome murders. Tonight on the MacNeil Lehrer NewsHour.
Good evening. Leading the news this Friday, Secretary of State Baker talked to Palestinian and Jordanian leaders about Palestinian representation at Mideast peace talks. The U.S. unemployment rate fell to 6.8%, and the House of Representatives voted to extend jobless benefits. We'll have the details in our news summary in a moment. Charlene Hunter-Galt is in New York tonight. Charlene?
After the news summary, two prominent Republicans face off on the president's position on civil rights, Education Secretary Lamar Alexander and Senator John Danforth. Next, our regular Gergen and Shields team weigh in on that and other political issues of the week. Then we look in on the Senate's efforts to unravel the tangled web of fraud at the Bank of Credit and Commerce International. And finally, the tensions unleashed by a series of gruesome murders in Milwaukee. Correspondent Elizabeth Brackett reports.
Funding for the NewsHour has been provided by AT&T. AT&T has supported the MacNeil Lehrer NewsHour since 1983 because quality information and quality communications is our idea of a good connection. AT&T, the right choice. And by PepsiCo. And by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by the financial support of viewers like you.
Secretary of State Baker today urged Palestinians to attend the Middle East Peace Conference. He said they had the most to lose if they did not. He said it in Jordan after a meeting with King Hussein. Israel wants a say in who will represent Palestinians at the talks. The Palestinians object to that demand. Earlier today, Baker met with a Palestinian delegation in Jerusalem, but failed to win their participation in the talks. At a Washington news conference today, President Bush spoke about the prospects for those Middle East peace talks.
In the Middle East, we're close to convening a conference this October that will launch direct talks among Israel, the Palestinians, and the Arab states. I welcome Prime Minister Shamir's statement that he supports our proposal, and I call upon Israel and the Palestinians to clear away remaining obstacles and seize this truly historic opportunity for peace.
The president also announced another peace conference, one between Turkey and Greece. He said those countries' presidents had agreed to discuss their long-standing dispute over the Mediterranean island of Cyprus. He said the talks would be held in September in the United States and be chaired by the United Nations Secretary General. Charlene?
Iraq invaded Kuwait 1 year ago today. President Bush used the occasion to restate his call for Saddam Hussein's removal from power. He was asked at his news conference whether Mikhail Gorbachev had supported his position on Iraq during their summit.
I did have a chance to discuss at the meeting that we had outside of Moscow the feelings that I've expressed here and that I've expressed before about the need to change Iraq's leadership, the fact that there will not be normalized relations with the United States anyway, as long as Saddam Hussein is in power. If the military talked him into stepping aside and getting out of there, I'd give him a real break as far as U.S. policy goes. I'd start over and say, all right, now you prove to us that you want to live within the family of nations peacefully. You show me now that you're going to comply with these resolutions, and we're going to give you every benefit of the doubt.
The Senate today voted to support the use of all necessary means to eliminate Iraq's nuclear, chemical, or biological weapons. Minority Leader Bob Dole said the Senate wanted to signal Saddam Hussein that Congress supports military action if those weapons are not destroyed. Earlier today, Secretary of Defense Cheney said the U.S. is prepared to use military force against Iraq if it continues to violate terms of the ceasefire. He said Iraq continued to conceal nuclear bomb-building equipment in violation of UN resolutions. And at the United Nations, Secretary General Perez de Cuellar presented a plan calling for long-term monitoring of Iraqi arms facilities. The proposal will be voted on by the Security Council. The CIA confirmed today it transferred large amounts of cash through the scandal-ridden Bank of Credit and Commerce International. Deputy Director Richard Kerr would not say if the funds were used for covert operations, but claimed the transactions were legal. Kerr made the remarks in answer to a question from a civics high school forum. Last week, CIA Director Webster ordered a review of any dealings the agency may have had with BCCI. Also today, the Senate Ethics Committee dismissed a series of charges against Senator Alphonse D'Amato, but it said he conducted his office in an inappropriate manner in dealings with the defense contractor. The committee called for no punishment against the New York Republican.
BCCI are the newest initials of scandal and corruption. They stand for Bank of Credit and Commerce International and for a story of scandal and corruption that is spreading across the world in many directions. Judy Woodruff has an update.
It was an almost unbelievable story, and it came out in Senate hearings aimed at untangling a snarl of worldwide financial and political dealings. Even before the testimony got underway, there were other developments this week. BCCI was fined $200 million by the U.S. Federal Reserve Board for a range of violations. The bank and its founder, a Pakistani tycoon, were indicted in New York for bribery and fraud. The U.S. Central Intelligence Agency revealed that it had warned in 1986 several federal agencies of BCCI's suspected shady dealings. More detail, fascinating but complicated, came out at the congressional hearings yesterday and today. Senator John Kerry, chairman of the Senate Subcommittee on Terrorism, Narcotics, and International Operations, opened Thursday's session by trying to explain BCCI's significance to average Americans.
BCCI is the most prominent and dramatic symbol of a way of doing business that challenges and diminishes people's faith in government, our government and governments around the world. Average people really don't believe, I think, that government is on their side these days. They don't believe that we can or that we want to protect them as we are supposed to do, and certainly that we don't protect them from banks that become the private playthings of the very rich and sometimes the crooked. And they are convinced that if you can afford to hire the best lawyers and the best accountants, you'll get a different deal, and you'll get away with almost anything in the world. There may be those who say that what BCCI did is somehow a victimless crime. I don't believe that. I don't think it's true. There are a lot of victims. The first is our system, in which we have invested so much.
The ranking Republican on the Senate subcommittee, Jesse Helms of North Carolina, suggested that the BCCI case has the plot of a bestseller.
Just imagine, if you will, that we sat down to write a book, a novel, about a group of drug traffickers and arms smugglers and terrorists and money launderers, about 3,000 of them. And suppose they had names like Noriega and Abu Nidal and Saddam Hussein. And suppose further that they wanted to start a full-service bank to advance their various enterprises. And suppose that they are smart enough to realize that a single bank in a single country, even a small country with convenient banking laws, would be too exposed and isolated to escape inquiry by a smart group of bank examiners. Now, if you put all those factors for our little scenario together, you'd come up with the founding concept of BCCI, or the Bank of Credit and Commerce International. Now, after a few false moves are repulsed, these crooks and criminals realize that they need to do more than just penetrate the U.S. banking system. They need to penetrate the U.S. political system. So now the plot thickens.
Helms said both Republicans and Democrats shared responsibility for BCCI's continued abuses. Yesterday's first witness, former Customs Chief William Von Raab, said his agency investigated BCCI for drug money laundering. One scheme using undercover agents led to a successful 1988 sting.
meetings?
Well, there was a famous marriage that never took place. One of the ways that we persuaded some of the bad guys to come to the United States was to pretend to have the two customs agents who had masqueraded as boyfriend and girlfriend planned to get married. And so all the bankers and all the drug traffickers planned to come to Tampa to go to this wedding. And they were all arrested at the bachelor's party the night before.
Following that sting, federal prosecutors in Tampa, Florida, accepted a plea bargain with BCCI. Von Raab said the agreement was shameless.
Well, part of the agreement, they basically agreed not to prosecute the bank or the individuals for anything that was, I'm not sure what the exact words were, but anything which the U.S. attorney there already knew about. And that was a lot. I mean, most of the documents were there. And it's not an unusual agreement where you really have finished off an investigation and you're trying to tie up loose ends and you're getting some meaningful cooperation. But it was unbelievable considering all of the loose ends and possible directions in which this could go to agree to exempt from the prospective scope of any investigation or prosecution all of the information that was available or was known to the U.S. attorney there. It's once again a tribute to the influence team that was marching up and down the eastern seaboard helping BCCI keep its neck off the block.
At the same time, the Senate was concluding a similar money laundering investigation that also led to BCCI. Investigator Jack Blum, who testified yesterday with Von Raab, got an unexpected lead.
I received a telephone call from a former client of mine who said, I was just talking to this guy who was very highly placed at BCCI, and he brought your name up. And he said that your investigation almost brought the house down there, and that there was a full court press to make sure that it didn't get anywhere. And I said, would this guy talk to me? We then debriefed this guy for 3 days, 3.5 days. And in the course of that debriefing, he laid out in exquisite detail the false capitalization of the bank, the question of straw men holding stock, loans to the straw men to pay for the stock, but the loans would never be collected, the use of the bank to purchase First American, National Bank of Georgia, Independence Federal in Encino, California. He went through the litany of things you're now reading about.
Blum said he turned over the information he gathered to the Justice Department. Blum and Von Raab both said that they now understand why nothing further came of the evidence they had uncovered.
I believe that it was a combination of a general softening of resolve in the senior U.S. officials by the incredible pounding they were taking by the influence peddlers in Washington. There wasn't a single influence peddler who wasn't being used to work this case. The result is that senior U.S. policy level officials were constantly under the impression that BCCI was probably not that bad because all these good guys that they play golf with all the time were representing them. Secondly, the Justice Department was very, very concerned about its Noriega prosecution. They wanted the best evidence they could possibly get to prosecute Noriega. It was believed that BCCI was a repository for great evidence against Noriega. I believe that the Justice Department was blinded by that possibility, and they saw the case much too much as a place to collect evidence in another case, and this was compounded by just a lackadaisical and sort of worked over, tired Treasury Department and Justice Department that resulted from the constant pounding it was receiving from the influence peddlers who either had been flattered, bought, or were just plain on contract by BCCI.
This scandal is an embarrassment to everybody who has anything to do with it. It's like the cesspool overflowing on the front lawn. There is culpability all around. There's culpability by foreign governments, within our own government. People know that they dealt with some of the same influence peddlers and fixers. There is a trail here in which almost everyone who touches it says, my God, this is going to wind up sticking to me. Everyone wanted it to go away. The Bank of England, desperately looking at the biggest scandal in history. How do you explain yourself as a regulator when you have a bank that for 15 years has cooked the books? Totally cooked the books. The problem that we're all having in dealing with this bank is that it had 3,000 criminal customers. And every one of those 3,000 criminal customers is a page one story. So if you pick up any one of those accounts, you could find financing for nuclear weapons, gun running, narcotic stealing, and you will find all manner and means of crime around the world in the records of this bank.
Agreed.
Today, the Senate subcommittee got a glimpse of BCCI's worldwide reach. Because of its huge debt, Peru used BCCI's Panama branch to protect $250 million in assets from aggressive creditors. 4 members of Peru's parliament told the committee they had evidence BCCI used bribes to get the Peruvian deposits.
On the part of members of the committee, we've discovered that all of this irregular and suspicious behavior in these transactions vis-a-vis our reserves and BCCI had a cause, and the cause was bribery. It was a payment of commissions, illicit commissions, to officers of the central bank and to other persons which are still to be identified, which remain to be.
The subcommittee will resume its hearings in September on BCCI's secret role in a prominent Washington bank.